You left early again. You said something about being tired, which wasn't technically a lie. You are tired, but not the kind sleep fixes. You're sitting in your car in the parking lot, and you haven't started the engine yet. And there it is, that exhale, the one that comes from somewhere deeper than your lungs. Your shoulders drop about 2 inches. Your jaw unclenches, and you didn't even know it was clenched. The noise is gone. Not the literal noise, the other one. The low-frequency hum of being perceived by multiple people simultaneously. Every glance processed. Every half-sentence decoded. Every shift in someone's tone cataloged by a part of your brain you never asked to be running. And right now, sitting alone in a dark car with the windows up and the engine still off, you feel something that would sound genuinely strange if you said it out loud. You feel like yourself again, not a better version, not a recovered version, the actual one, the one that apparently can't exist in a room full of people no matter how much you like those people. If that landed somewhere specific in your chest, this video is going to explain something about you that you've probably sensed for years, but never had the precise language for. And I want to be clear from the start. I don't mean you're introverted. That word has been so overused, so flattened by internet quizzes and motivational Instagram posts, that it barely carries any real information anymore. What I'm talking about is deeper, more biological, and significantly more interesting than a personality label someone hands you at a dinner party to make your quietness more socially digestible. Here's the version of you that other people seem to carry around in their heads. You're antisocial, or you're shy, or you're depressed and just haven't realized it yet. Or, and this is the one that really lingers, you just need to put yourself out there more. Like socializing is a muscle you've been neglecting, and a few more reps would fix whatever's apparently wrong with you. The assumption underneath every single one of these is identical. Your natural resting state is a problem, and the solution is more people, more frequently, with more visible enthusiasm. What's genuinely fascinating is how confidently wrong all of that is. In 1967, psychologist Hans Eysenck proposed something in his work on the biological basis of personality that has held up remarkably well across decades of neuroscience. He called it arousal theory. The simplified version is this: introverted brains aren't understimulated. They are already running at a higher baseline of cortical arousal than extroverted brains before anything external even happens. Your resting state, right now, sitting alone reading this, is already closer to what an extroverted brain needs a crowded bar to reach. You're not avoiding stimulation because something went wrong in your wiring. Your nervous system is already doing more processing than most people's just sitting quietly in an empty room. So every conversation at that gathering, every ambient noise, every side glance you unconsciously registered, every micro-calculation about whether you're being perceived as interested enough or present enough or normal enough, all of that wasn't just experienced by you. It was experienced at a higher neurological volume. The room wasn't overwhelming because you're fragile. The room was overwhelming because your brain was running a significantly more demanding operation with the exact same inputs as everyone else. You just didn't get the luxury of knowing that's what was happening. If you're already recognizing your own nervous system in this, and we haven't even gotten to the part that actually changes how you see yourself, subscribe. This channel was built for the way your brain works. Now let's go further, because the arousal theory explains the drain, but it doesn't fully explain something else: the restoration. That feeling of coming back to yourself when you're alone. That part is its own phenomenon. In 1997, psychologist Elaine Aron published research that quietly reshaped how we understand human temperament. She identified a trait she called sensory processing sensitivity, present in roughly 15 to 20% of the human population. Not a disorder, not a dysfunction, a biological trait, and one that's been found across over 100 other animal species, from primates to fish to fruit flies. Evolution didn't discard it, it kept selecting for it. That should tell you something about its value. What Aron documented was that individuals with this trait don't just react more to stimulation, they process sensory and emotional information at a fundamentally deeper level. Not more emotionally, deeper. And those are meaningfully different things. More emotional means you react with greater visible intensity. Deeper means you process longer, connect more threads, notice subtleties that other people's brains efficiently discard. Your brain doesn't skim. It reads every line, rereads the ones that mattered, and occasionally writes notes in the margin that nobody asked for. In 2014, neuroscientist Bianca Acevedo took this further. She ran fMRI brain scans on individuals who scored high on Aaron's sensitivity scale, and the results were striking. Their brains showed significantly greater activation in regions tied to awareness, sensory integration, empathy, and self-other processing. They weren't imagining that the world felt like more. Their brains were measurably, visibly doing more with the same world everyone else was moving through, without a second thought. So when you're at a dinner with 6 people, and by hour 2 you feel like you've run a cognitive marathon while everyone else is ordering another round, you're not being dramatic. Your brain has been running a fundamentally more complex operation than the person across from you who's still going strong. You haven't failed at socializing. You've been doing more of it than anyone in the room realized, including you. But here's where most explanations of this stop, and honestly where the actually interesting part begins. Because if it were purely about stimulation, you'd feel drained everywhere. In crowds, at home, at work, alone in your own kitchen. But that's not what happens, is it? You leave the gathering, and within 20 minutes of quiet, something begins to shift. Your thoughts slow down enough to become recognizable. An hour alone, and you can feel your mind reorganizing itself, like files being put back where they belong. A full evening with no one else's energy in the room, and you feel something that can only honestly be described as restored. Not rested, restored, as in returned to your original shape. That asymmetry, drained by people, rebuilt by solitude, is not a mood, it's not a phase, it's neurological. In 2018, researchers Thuy V. Nguyen, Richard Ryan, and Edward Deci published a series of studies on what actually happens to the human brain during solitude. What they found was that time alone reliably reduces what psychologists call high arousal emotional states. Not just the negative ones, like anxiety and overstimulation, but the positive performance ones too. The social monitoring, the constant subtle calculation of how you're being received, the invisible effort of managing how much of yourself to reveal in real time. All of it recedes. What replaces it are low arousal positive states. Calm, reflectiveness, a particular quality of mental stillness that isn't emptiness. It's closer to clarity. For most people, that shift is pleasant. Nice, even. A warm bath at the end of a long day. But for someone whose brain runs at higher baseline arousal, whose nervous system has spent the last 4 hours processing every social signal in a room at a resolution nobody else required, that solitude isn't just pleasant. It's the only environment where the system stops running in emergency mode and returns to its actual architecture. You're not hiding from the world. Your brain is performing its version of a controlled shutdown and restart. And the result isn't less of you. It's more. The thoughts that couldn't form in a noisy room suddenly arrive fully shaped. The creativity that seemed absent in company shows up 20 minutes into silence like it was waiting by the door the whole time. You're not antisocial, you're running complex software on hardware that needs proper cooling. And solitude is the only cooling system that actually works. Now, the part that takes more honesty than the rest of this combined, because not everyone sitting in a car alone after a social event is simply a sensitive introvert having a reasonable neurological experience. Some people retreat because somewhere along the way, people became unpredictable in a way that never fully resolved. A childhood where the emotional weather in the house shifted without warning. A parent whose mood you had to read at the door before your body could decide whether it was safe to relax. A friendship where closeness eventually delivered something that made you quietly vow to keep a little more distance next time. And the time after that, for those people, solitude doesn't just feel restorative, it feels safe. And the difference between restorative and safe matters enormously, because one is a preference built on biology, and the other is a wound dressed in the same clothing. The distinction hides well. It can live undetected inside a personality for decades. The tell is in what happens when someone actually tries to get close. If your solitude is a genuine preference, closeness feels welcome, just in smaller, more deliberate doses. You let people in on your own timeline, and the experience feels warm, even if it also feels intense. But if solitude became a fortress somewhere along the way, closeness stops feeling warm and starts feeling like a breach. Not because you don't want connection, you do, but your nervous system learned, in some early and possibly wordless chapter of your life, that proximity to people is where the unpredictable things happened. And it built the walls accordingly, not out of coldness, out of architecture. The kind that was designed by a version of you who was too young to know what they were building and too smart not to build it. And if that last paragraph describes something you've never said to anyone out loud, sit with it for a second before you move on. Because the people who most need to hear that are almost always the ones who are most practiced at rerouting the conversation before it gets this close. They'll call it independence. They'll call it just how I am. And they'll say it with the kind of quiet certainty that only someone who has been rehearsing the line for years can deliver. If something in the last 2 minutes landed in a way you didn't expect, drop a comment. Not for the algorithm, because the person scrolling through these comments at 1 a.m. is probably carrying the exact same thing and has never once seen somebody put it into actual words. I want to be fair here. Extroverted brains aren't doing anything wrong. Their dopamine reward pathways respond more strongly to social novelty and external stimulation, and that's documented neuroscience, not a character flaw. They genuinely get from a crowded room what you get from an empty one. Neither wiring is superior. The uncomfortable part is that the world was built to reward one system and quietly pathologize the other. Open-plan offices, mandatory team building, the cultural equation that busy means productive and alone means something must be wrong. You've been swimming against a current that was designed for a different body your entire life, and the fatigue you feel at the end of every social week isn't weakness, it's friction between who you are and what the environment keeps asking you to perform. So where does that leave you? You're not the person who can't handle people. You're the person whose brain handles people at such high resolution that it requires actual recovery time afterward. That isn't a limitation. It's an operating cost for a system that catches what everyone else in the room missed entirely. The shift in someone's voice mid-sentence. The thing that was said slightly too quickly. The emotional current underneath an entire conversation that everyone else floated through without registering. The exhaustion was never evidence that something was broken in you. It was evidence of how much you were actually doing, while looking like you were doing nothing. And the solitude, the part of your life that everyone around you keeps gently trying to fix or fill or schedule over, that was never emptiness. It was your brain, finally running the way it was designed to, in the only environment that lets it. This is what this channel is here for. Not surface-level personality content. The actual neuroscience and psychology underneath the things you experience every day but were never given the framework to understand. Every video here is built to hand you that framework, not so you can label yourself and stop there, but so the next time someone suggests there's something wrong with how you're wired, you know exactly why there isn't. There's a link in the description and pinned in the comments to something built specifically for brains that run the way yours does. A structured set of daily guides covering dopamine resets, sleep repair, focus rebuilding, and mental overstimulation recovery. Not theory, steps, because your brain doesn't need more information to process. It needs a system that works with the way you're wired instead of against it. Worth a look if any of this hit close. And if this is the kind of content your brain has been looking for, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.